Hi everybody, welcome back to our kitchen at Ice. Continuing on with our MasterChef series, very lucky to have my friend David Pugh here today, Exec Chef of the Brisbane Convention Centre. He's got a little bit of time on his hands at the moment, which is really good for us. It's our plus. And he's very kindly said he would come in today to show you a few of the basic skills that I know he's very, very good at. One of those is going to be some poultry preparation for you. So I believe Dave's going to do two different preparations with the chicken. I think one's going to be a traditional cutting down of the breasts and the wings and the legs. And the other one, I think we're going to do a cut for sauté, aren't we? Something a bit different.
Yeah, something a little bit different. And we think of it in a new way as well, where we're not trying to trim it within an inch of its life. We're trying to make it, every part of the chicken is edible. So then we're going to have the carcass left over for a beautiful stock. Yeah,
beautiful. And cutting for sauté was something I learnt when I was a beginner chef and I was 16, about 4 years ago now. I learnt to cut the chicken on the bone, so that's the difference. One of them will take the chicken and the flesh off of the bone and be left with all the bones. Even the chicken ballantine has the bone taken out of the thigh and drumstick. It's an old-fashioned preparation, it's really good to learn. But the sauté is cut on the bone, and we, as most chefs would agree, we believe that when the meat's left on the bone, it makes more flavour, of course.
Yes.
And if it goes into a braise or a casserole or chicken chasseur or coq au vin, one of those beautiful old French provincial dishes, he's going to get the flavour of the bones as well, so it's going to make a great dish. So over to you, Dave. Floor's yours. Thank you, David.
Thank
you. Keep watching.
Thank you very much, Alison. And we've got some beautiful free-range chickens here today, and we're going to be doing just cutting or dissecting these birds down. Very meaty, and you can tell just by the look of them, they're not your average commercial chook. And poultry is one of those items where you've got to be extremely careful, especially the health regulations, that you do keep an eye on how you're actually treating the birds, and before and afterwards, and preparation is key. So nice clean board, well set up. Obviously, when you're doing something like this, you've got just a non-slip mat underneath. Very crucial because you're doing a bit of knife work, and the last thing you want to do is to slip with an extra sharp knife and put one through your hand. I've been to hospital a few times for that sort of injury. So a nice sharp knife, nice sharp cut. With these ones, we've got birds that look to be about a number 20 chicken. And there's always just a little bit of fat inside. Good thing about chicken, as with any animal, any of this fat's all natural, it's all good. That can be rendered down. You can saute or cook your potatoes and that. You hear about duck fat potatoes, you don't hear much about chicken fat potatoes. The other thing we used to do in England, we used to make our chicken velouté, a bit old-fashioned I know, but something with a roux, flour in it. And when we're doing the chicken sauces, we'd actually render down the chicken fat and use half butter and then half chicken fat and give it a unbelievable flavour. So even back in the, God forbid, the 80s, chefs were actually thinking about what was going into it. And it wasn't a question of saving money then, but because butter was supposed to be and still is king. In this instance, it was a matter of what we could utilise off the bird rather than sending it off to the waste department. So, always thinking about what you can possibly do with any of the product. This one, you see you got the cavity, and when you're if you're doing something simple like a roast, my normal procedure is we get a good bunch of herbs and stuff it inside the cavity. A couple of lemons cut in half, slipped inside, the juice comes out during the cooking process, and then we make a jus or a gravy based on that. You've got the parson's nose, got the sweat glands in there, and that's always part of the bird which I like to eat. It's got a lot of fat comes through in there, but the tail end gets nice and crispy, and it's one of the first ones I go for. It's kind of like when you get lamb, you've got the shank on the lamb. For me, it's a parson's nose on the chicken, or the oysters just on the back there, which we'll get to. But the first one we'll do, we'll cut just the legs, the breasts, then we've got the wing tips. I'll show you how to clean those up. And this is in this day and age where we've gone from utilising a lot of chicken breast, which if you overcook can be very dry, so we tend to use a lot of sous vide these days. Or the other option is you go for what we call the Marylands. You've got the drumsticks, you've got the thighs, you keep the two together. You can do something like a beautiful ballantine, which you guys usually learn in your stage 3, stage 2, stage 3, which is, you might say it's old-fashioned, but it's how to take what used to be a cheaper cut of meat, put a filling into it, keep it nice and moist, and just give some complete point of difference. And then you team it up with your couscous, with your polenta, with the mash, anything like that. It's a beautiful dish. So anything to do with a bird like this, you've got to respect the actual produce. It's it's a sublime looking chicken. We've got to take good care of it. So the first instance, we're going to leave the legs as they are. Simple reason, once we take those off, it takes the balance off the chicken. So we can cut down here, just keep the legs on, and they're the last things that we actually remove. So you keep the balance, and it makes it easier when you're taking the breasts off. With the actual breast itself, we'll take it off, we'll clean it up, and then we'll take the what we call the wing bones off. And we used to use those for a garnish for a consommé, or now you get the buffalo wings. So it's a good way to you braise them down, soy, whatever combination you want. There's multi combinations these days, and good to dip into a sauce and then into your mouth, and great with a few beers, Corona beers, pardon the pun. All right, we'll get right into it. I've got an old familiar friend here. This one's it'd probably be as old as your mum and dad. It's about 40 or so years old. I picked it up in London. It was a little bit of a bigger knife then, but good friends, you never get rid of them. So we're just going to loosen up on the thigh as you cut, and it's not a question of making a sharp, decisive cut. If you just lay it out like that, you've got the bones exposed. You can see that beautiful flesh there, so it's not white and anemic and flavourless. This is a beautiful chicken which looks like it's been raised on grain. You've got the wingtip bone in there. Next process, just for ease of footage for you guys, we just get the knife into there. Just make sure you don't take too much skin away from the actual breast, so that's a protection when it's cooking. And if you're diet conscious, I've done some demos for the Wesley Hospital before, and had the guys in there have just been recovering from their heart surgery, their triple bypass, whatever they've had in their life, which has not been too good for them. And at the same time, I've had the people who are doing their diets for them, and my question was, can I actually cook a chicken with the skin on, fat, etc., and then take it off? Because they're all about reducing the fat, and my thoughts on that were, once I take that fat and skin off, once I do that, then one, there's no protection. Two, what are you going to be cooking it in? Probably olive oil. What's better for you, olive oil or chicken? Chicken fat reduced down. My thoughts on that are, I would rather have a nice flavour of chicken fat than I would of olive oil. And I got a pretty good agreement from the girls that were doing the diets up at the Wesley. They said it's entirely up to the person concerned, but they could see no reason why you couldn't cook with the actual skin or the fat on. So if you've got somebody that comes into your business and they actually want a fat reduced chicken, just cook it, pull the skin off, send it out, and just tell them what you're doing beforehand. So we got the actual breasts here. Just got to find the bone. Remember, any flesh you leave on there is complete and utter, well, it's not a complete and utter waste, but it is wasteful, because all it's going to do is go into a stock. Unless if you're that bad, you're going to be scraping down all your chicken bones and you're going to be making it up for a mousse. If you do a good job, you shouldn't need to go down that road. So we've found the breastbone there, and then we cut all the way through. You can use a boning knife. This one, I've used an old favourite cook's knife. It's quite sharp, And all we're doing is just following down with the bone and then just pulling back with your hand at the same time, up against the wishbone there. And then when you get down to that joint there, in through. So we've got a beautiful breast there. And we go to plan B, other side. Again, down. Okay, so on the second side. Again, just pushing. You're going to have a favourite side, whether you're left-handed or right-handed. Down there, onto that particular bone there, you can see the joint. We lift. Beautiful. So we'll trim those up, and again, we can put anything that's not going to be able to go into a certain dish will go into the stock pot or into making a sauce. Then we get to just a little bit of trim on there. We've got the wishbone, and there's a bit of flesh around that. So all that can be trimmed up. All right, and then we get to the legs. Now remember, just underneath the chicken, you've got what we call the oyster. And when I was an apprentice, we used to roast chickens. We used to do quite a few cruise lines. Not very funny these days, but we used to do quite a few cruise lines, and they would come in the evening, and part on their buffet selection was fresh roast chicken. There was no such thing as a cryovac chicken back then, or even a frozen chicken for that matter. So the chickens would come in fresh, we'd roast them off, and then we'd have to break them down. And you always used to put your hand up to break down the chickens, because you get a staff dinner of oysters. And that's the little piece that sits just there in that little pocket. And again, just slip the knife around there, that's your oyster again. Just come round, just in a nice loop. So think about what you're going to do before you do it. Remember, you've got the oyster there, you want to take it off in one hit, because otherwise it's going to be a little bit of a waste. What we've got left over is a nice chicken frame. Smell nice and fresh. Now and again, depending on how the chicken has been actually processed, you're going to find some blood clots in there. And that's usually the only carry-on you're going to get from a customer, is that they've got a blood clot in their chicken. Well, if that's the worst, then that's okay. It's just something that you have no control over, and it may be in against the bone, just depending on how these little fellas have been processed or dealt with at the abattoir. When we go to the saute, then we'll clean it up just a little bit further. So we've got the thigh bone in here, and if we're doing a ballantine, what we're doing is keeping all the flesh intact, and as few knife cuts as possible. Take it down to a certain point, and this works exactly the same when you're dealing in things like lamb and pork to a lesser degree. You get to that point, you can keep your bone in here. So you've got the knuckle exposed. Trim that off. So that one's going in the stock pot. If you really want to go any further, you can chase that bone down So then you've got, and just pull that back. We've just got a little knob of bone there. Well, actually, it's just been a pain in the butt, so we'll just take it off, just to make it easier to access. The thing is, if you're using a boning knife, you've got to make sure that it fits into your hand. So it's like anything with knives, it's all subjective. You look at what knife suits your particular hand and not what brand it is. So I've had a lot of different brands over the years. If I'm doing anything at home, I usually have a Victorinox handy. If I'm doing anything at work, which is getting less and less these days, it will be, if not a Victorinox, then maybe an old-fashioned Sabatier or a Fury knife. I've got a few good Japanese knives and they come out on special occasions. And just a little bit of bone there, which is normal. You get the sinews coming through here. For a chicken, is not so bad. When you get something that does a lot of running, like a pheasant or a guinea fowl, they have a lot of sinews running through and they're literally inedible. So then you've got to, used to have an old-fashioned butcher's hook we used to have at the hotel. You put the leg on it and pull it, and we'll pull all the sinews out. So that's the sort of thing that I'm talking about. It's not so bad in the bird and it will break down, so we just nick it there. Again, just taking it down. Now, if we want to keep it for presentation, what we're going to do, we're going to clip that bone, and we're still going to have a nice piece of bone left on the end there for presentation. So in this instance, we just clip it there. So we've achieved two things. We've got a completely hollow piece of chicken, which you can use to wrap for a ballantine, and you've still got that bone on the end there for presentation, just like that. We go to the breast, we just nick in through there. If we're doing buffalo wings, and what we have a tendency to do, you can clip it just through there, so you've still got that piece of bone on. Where you tend to find a lot of the blood clots with the chicken is in that space there. So we'll put that aside for the time being. Buffalo wings, you would leave the whole lot on. But I'll give you something just a little bit different. If we wanted to use these particular chicken winglets for a garnish, so we've clipped it right through. This is called the French call it the aileron. So then you've got like just a double cutlet. You want to roast those little babies off. You cook them skin side down, a little bit of salt, some herbs and some garlic. Really nice like that. And then you have a dipping sauce. You know, you're going to have a ranch dressing. The other thing we used to do was we'd just nick the back end there. There's just a bit of connective tissue. And we would take the actual bone out. And that's okay when you're paying somebody like £1 an hour or £1.50 an hour. In this day and age, no, it doesn't equate. Quite easy, you just pull those bones out, put it back up, and the same filling that you put into your leg, you can put into your wingtip. So it's a nice hollow package like that. You can steam it, or you can just slowly cook it, skin side down. You can even toothpick it just to hold it in place. So it just shows you the versatility on the chicken. Okay, we've gone onto the breast. We've got a little bit there, just a little bit of overhang. We're going to put all that skin to one side. Let's put it over here actually, because we can utilise that, and we can turn it into some crackling. And like, while we might have some crispy fried shallot going on top of a Vietnamese dish, nothing to say you can't take some chicken skin and just nice and slowly in a non-stick pan or a thick pan, just reduce it down so you've got some little what we call cracklings for an actual dish. Okay, just a little bit more skin off there. Now you're starting to get a bit more like what turns up at a cafe or a restaurant or a hotel in the way of a chicken breast when you order one. Just take that little bit off there. It's predominantly you've got a little bit of flesh in there. The rest is mainly skin. Put that one side. And then the rest is up to you for presentation, whether or not you want to do what we used to do in the 80s, clip it all the way around. Now we tend to just leave it as it is, simply because it's work, it's time consuming. You know how to do it, so I'm not trying to prove anything. We get it to that point, and when you're clipping bones, don't be half-hearted, because then you'll fracture them. And there's nothing worse than having a piece of bone which is actually splintered. So our beautiful breast there, in actual fact, if you're cooking that one off, that and the leg, you could feed 3, nearly 4 people. There's quite a bit of meat there. So in this particular bird, you get away with 6 to 8 people on the bird. And what you do, you push up your carbs and your vegetables and starch, and then you're going to be 50% of the meal is going to be on the bird, and then the rest will be on the garnish, which is going with it. So, very nice presentation. Again, let's go again. So we take that skin off the under there, just a little bit off the tip, so it still comes down nicely. Roll over. Got a little bit of fat there. Trim it off. Okay, and we go to here. Again, we go down through the joint. Just a quick hammer with a hand. If your hands aren't that tough, you're going to get a bigger knife and just belt it through. And we can use that one just as it is for presentation. The other thing about that, if you're not cleaning that up, there's a fair bit of meat that people can eat off there, and by the time it's finished cooking, you've got another 15, 20 grams. So a beautiful presentation, still just a bit different. And again, with this one, if we're doing buffalo wings, we're going to leave that as it is, so they've got something to hold on to when they're putting that into their mouth. Or again, we clip it down. That one's for the stock pot, or crispied up. And we just loosen this up a little bit, and that's going to be for the wings. Just be careful when you're cooking it off that you don't burn the bones. Okay, so without and then with, just 2 different ways. Okay, and that's just preparation of breasts, legs, how to get to that particular stage.